Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of Vols Grow. We really appreciate that you joined us and taken some time from your day to get this initiative kicked off with us. As you may have read in the information that's been posted on social media, and also if you've received your seeds already, you will have read that this is the launching of a new initiative on our campus called End Hunger, Feed Change. And today we're going to kick off the summer event of growing some plants together as a community and seeing what we can produce in our agrarian roots. So joining me today are a few panelists who are going to first explain a bit more about the initiative that we're doing on campus. This is a joint effort between UT Institute of Agriculture and the Knoxville campus. And we are welcoming two members of from the Institute of Agriculture, as well as a faculty member from Religious Studies, who will be speaking with us today about this initiative. So I'd first like to introduce to you Dr. Tom Gill from the Smith Center for Sustainable Agriculture Development, and he is going to kick off with some information about the initiative and share a few facts around food insecurity. Tom?
Great, thanks, Gretchen. It's good to be with everyone this afternoon, and thank you for the warm welcome. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the End Hunger, Feed Change initiative and talk just real briefly about food insecurity, why we care about that, why that's important to us as a university from local to global. And it's really important because food security affects us all. Food security has three main components: access, availability, and utilization. And here in the United States, we tend to see more challenges with access to food, although having the right quality and the right quantity of food is also important. And this is an important issue all the way from looking at campus all the way to what we're doing also with faculty and students around the world. So on campus, for example, a recent study that was done by a couple of UT faculty noted that 32%, almost 1/3 of all UT Knoxville students can be classified as food insecure. Now, that can mean all kinds of different things. I realize that food insecurity can have a lot of different meanings to people, but that really means folks who are not able to meet the food needs which they had hoped to. So this can be skipping meals. This can be eating just poor quality, not very well balanced meals, high in carbs and fat, and not necessarily high in what might make a balanced nutritional diet. What's interesting to note, though, is that these numbers are double the state and double the national average, at least, if not more. And this is really worrying for us. How are we going to address this on our campus? And I think we need a multi-pronged approach that involves multiple people, and that involves students, staff, faculty, administrators, to all pull together, which is why then we need to have this End Hunger, Feed Change initiative. If we look at the state numbers, there are about 1 million people in the state who are also classified as food insecure. And this is troubling because it's not then just a Knoxville campus issue. It's not just an Appalachia issue. It's an issue across all of Tennessee, affecting both urban and rural. And it's something that can really be amplified during this era of COVID. So there obviously aren't data right now for us to be able to know what COVID means for people's food security status within the state, but we can expect that it has not improved. It has likely worsened for many. And without access to the right kinds of foods, people then can be more susceptible to illness and can be less productive at work, and it can be this vicious cycle. Finally, talking about uh, global stats, why it's important for us globally, uh, it's important to note that we cannot live in a bubble, that we have a lot that we can share with others around the world. And there are almost 1 billion people who are hungry around the world. Yeah, Catherine, could you advance just one more slide? There we go. So latest numbers from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization noted that we had about 821 million people who are hungry worldwide. And again, it's likely that COVID-19 is going to force that higher. Now, these people are people that are classified as undernourished, but this does not then tell the full story, because there is a large and increasing segment of our global population that can be considered overnourished, overweight, and obese. And a lot of that relates to poor diet and food insecurity and issues about having access to an unbalanced diet. And it's estimated that approximately 3 billion out of the 7.5 billion people on the planet face some kind of daily food insecurity. So without addressing food insecurity from this whole campus through local to global, we cannot really make the impact if we just try and bite off the global piece or just the campus piece. We really need to be thinking about how can we address this as a university community? What's our role to be active members of society, from our very Knoxville campus to our city, to our nation and our world? So with that, that just gives you some kind of background. I want to pass you over now to Dr. Helene Sinerick, who's going to introduce you then to our themed year.
Hi. So we shared this information and these statistics not to scare you, but to bring awareness to this global crisis. And it's a global crisis that's actually exacerbated by the current pandemic. And to give you a little bit of hope, let's talk for a moment about what we can do as volunteers. So as volunteers, we can engage in a number of activities. And this year we have put together a themed year, which is dedicated to raising awareness about global hunger and food insecurity, and trying to address some of these issues and posit some solutions. And there's a number of ways in which we're going to be doing that. One is to have research workshops and seminars where we share with you different kinds of research going on here on campus and outside of campus on these issues, both locally and globally. We are planning to have a campus book reading and seminar. We will have a number of activities focused on World Food Day, as well as cooking demonstrations to help people learn about ways in which they can have more balanced meals. And we're going to be introducing new academic programs focused on hunger. Can you advance? So this overall initiative will serve to raise awareness about global hunger and local hunger and campus hunger, and provide students who are competent, globally aware, and socially engaged.
Okay, Thank you, Helene. So I'm Catherine Griffin. I also work with the End Hunger Feed Change Initiative, and I would just like to say we're going to pass this over now to Holly Jones to conduct our webinar on how to get your seeds started and take care of them. And joining her is also James Noburn. They both work with the UT Gardens. We're very excited that they agreed to join us today and to carry this out. So thank you and welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Yeah, so I'm Holly Jones, and I work with the team at UT Gardens. And one of the things that I do there is to manage our edible plant collection. So we have a large kitchen garden where we grow vegetables, small fruits and herbs, and we donate those to local food banks. So we grow a lot of things from seed. And so I am going to be talking today about seed starting and plant care. And James is going to be here to chime in and help me and answer questions, hopefully, if you guys have questions.
Absolutely. And we think it's important. A lot of people from campus are maybe not aware of the resource that the UT Gardens provides here on campus. But we do have, as Holly mentioned, wonderful examples of how to grow vegetables, small fruits, herbs in a small space. You can do this in a container on a balcony. You know, you can do this in a small raised bed. So it really applies can be applied to an urban setting, a suburban setting, an apartment setting, condo setting, or a more rural setting where you might have, perhaps our students might have a home garden at their parents' home that offers some land to grow. So we encourage people to utilize the resource that UT Gardens presents. So go ahead, Holly.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen and make sure I have the right one shared. I think I want this one.
Yep.
All right, great. Okay, so we're going to talk about seed starting and plant care. So this is going to be pretty quick, but I just want to go over some of the high points, talking about growing media, light exposure, we'll talk about water, and we're going to look at nutrients or fertilizer. So looking at growing media, the first one of the big important things to keep in mind is sterility. So it's just really important when you're starting things from seed to have sterile growing media. So if you use like recycled potting soil from an old pot, or you use soil from the ground, it can have soil-borne pathogens. There's a lot of fungus that can be in the soil that can be detrimental to seed starting. So you can eliminate a lot of problems from the get-go just by starting with a sterile mix.
Go
ahead.
I would chime in there too that maybe trying to recycle old soil from a pot that's been outside, you get a lot of weed seeds in it as well, same with soil from the ground. So when we talk about media, we are talking about the substrate that you are growing your seed in. Basically, it's soil, except it's manufactured. That's what we grow, what all nursery and greenhouse growers grow in. So we don't want competition from our weed seeds. We don't want to be confused about what the plant we're trying to grow is compared to what a weed seed is. So a lot of times they look very similar when they're just sprouting. So going with a sterile growing media is a good place to start.
Yes. And so you want to make sure that whatever you're using is going to hold moisture, but also drain freely. So there are different types of potting soil that you can buy. For the most part, if you buy some that's bagged from the store, it's going to have some sphagnum peat moss in it, and that's really going to help retain the moisture. But it's very important that the water drains out as well, because you don't want to have soggy soil. And then when you're putting it in the growing media, you just want to pay attention to planting at the proper depth. And normally your seed package will tell you like how deep to plant your seed. But a general rule of thumb is like twice as deep as your seed is, as the size of your seed. So really small seeds are just going to need a really light covering of the potting soil. And the purpose of that is to, the way I look at it is it's helping the seed not to dry out, you know, so having that little layer of protection on top is going to help the seed to stay moist during the process of germination.
Right, and I would reiterate there that just go kind of common sense by the size of the seed. If it's not on the seed packet, which I think Catherine mentioned that it was not.
Yeah.
So if you, let's just say a sunflower seed is pretty big, you know, it might be 1/4 of an inch long, so you're going to want to dibble your finger down in that soil and about a 1/2 inch deep or knuckle deep, and then cover it. Bean seeds are the same way, they're pretty big. Smaller radish seeds, lettuce seeds will just need that light covering on top. Like what I tell our students is like sprinkling cheese on a pizza.
Yes, add a little bit on top. All right, so moving on to light. Especially once your seeds have germinated, once they've sprouted and you start to see the leaves on there, this is when it's most important, you know, to start thinking about light and getting the light to your plant. And so there are a few options when you're thinking about providing sun. Oh, and you know what, Catherine, did we do the survey?
We did not. Do you want to do the?
Yeah, let's throw that in now. Sorry, I did forget about it. Yes,
okay.
We have a survey with a few questions, so we can send that out and the participants can answer.
Okay, well, here's the first one. How much experience do you have with gardening? We'll give everyone a little bit of time to answer.
Live survey, this is cool.
Okay, go ahead and end the polling.
Okay.
So there are results. A little over half have some experience with family gardening. Oh, I have, please forgive me, I am my first webinar. I'm not technically skilled. I see that someone raised their hand, and we'll try to find you. Okay.
If the question is where is the survey, it should have popped up on your screen. It did on mine.
Yeah, so okay. There, Brittany Davidson, did you have a question about the survey? We will have time at the end for questions.
So sorry, I accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, okay. Well, it was
wrong button.
okay. There we go. So I'm going to mute you back. And we have one other poll that is, so I'll stop the results. And where's the next one? Okay, so here's the next question. So where will your plant grow?
This is going to be good information because it does make a difference on maintaining the conditions that Holly's about to mention.
Okay, so here are the results.
Oh,
Can
good.
you all see those?
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so,
So most are going to be outside with a few inside,
okay,
looks like.
Mostly in a container.
Right.
yeah.
All right.
All
Go
right,
ahead,
so
Holly.
those are what I had. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. So I'll get rid of that. All right, so, okay, great. So most people are putting it outside in a container, but you're probably starting your seed inside. So for those of you that are going to be growing indoors, a sunny window can be a good option. And the key there is knowing exactly how much sun you are getting. So for the most part, I think all the seeds that you guys were sent are, vegetables and herbs. They really want full sun. So what does that mean? That means 6 hours of direct sun, 6 or more hours. So you're going to get the best results with 6 or more hours of direct sun. So that would be like a south facing window, or possibly, some combination of southwest or southeast. So it is important to pay attention to how many hours you really are getting. And you'll get mixed results with less sun exposure. So you can probably get the plant to grow, but it's not going to produce the fruit or the vegetable that you're trying to produce if you're getting not very much sun at all. And you're going to get a lot more leggy growth if it's not in enough light. One thing to think about if you're moving your plant once it's germinated and you want to increase the sun exposure is just to be careful not to burn your really young plants. And so you can just acclimate them to the more intense sunlight. And the way you're going to do this is just by, incrementally increasing the exposure over the course of a few days. So you can give them like 3 hours of sunlight on one day, and then the next day you can increase it by an hour. The next day increase it until you've built them up to the full sun exposure.
And you are talking there, Holly, as when you might be moving it outside.
Well, yeah, and I was thinking too, in a sunny window as well. Like if you have like a western facing window and it's getting that full afternoon burning sun, and you've germinated your seed in this safe little spot that was, maybe in a darker spot, and then if you put it on day one into your west facing window, it's possible that you could burn that little seedling. So I think it applies to outdoors or indoors if you're using natural sunlight.
And I would add there too, if you're growing things indoors, which you can be very successful. You can grow herbs in a sunny window, but you may want to periodically, like every other day or so, rotate that pot so that a different side of the plant is getting the sun. So you get more even growth as opposed to always stretching towards the sunny side of the window. That includes your house plants as well.
Good point. So the next option would be, so if you're growing indoors and you don't think you have enough light coming in your sunny window, you might want to think about providing some supplemental artificial light. And 2 successful ways to do that. One is you can use a fluorescent bulb. Those are, just the long standard fluorescent light bulbs. Those will work for most plants. But the key there with the fluorescence is you do have to have your plant close enough to the light source to get the intensity that they need. So that's like 1 to 2 inches away from the fluorescent light bulb. So it is quite close. So you just have to plan on how to either move your light bulb closer to your plant or move your plant closer to your light bulb. And then as your plant is growing, you're going to want to move the light bulb away a little bit. You can have pretty good success with the fluorescent bulbs. The other option for supplemental lighting would be LED grow lights. And these are becoming more and more common. They're really pretty affordable these days. And they are going to provide the full spectrum of light that the plants need to grow. and you don't have to have them quite as close to the plant as you do with the fluorescent bulbs. And also the LEDs last longer, so you wouldn't need to replace the light bulb as quickly. I have some LED grow lights that I use in my home office, and they work really well. So that is definitely a good option. And then the final thing is to just put it outdoors in the full sun and utilize the power of the sunshine. And it sounds like a lot of you all have space to do that, so that's great. Anything else on light, James?
I think we're good there.
All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about water. So we talked about this with the potting soil, but the key here is we want to have moist soil, but we don't want it to be soggy. So the plant roots need to have air as well as water. So if we water every single day, we can fill up all those pore spaces in the growing media and eliminate any space for air. So it's important to water consistently, but not just water every single day. You need to kind of let the soil dry out a little bit between watering. And so how often that's going to be is going to depend on a few things. What you used for your planting medium. Some potting soils are going to hold moisture more effectively than other potting soils. And so that's just going to be a matter of like sticking your finger in there and feeling it and trying to get a feel for how much water is being held over the course of time. Where you have your pot located is going to affect how often you have to water. So if you have a really, really sunny window and you have a small pot, it could be that your pot will dry out faster. And then how old your plant is also going to affect it. So again, size of pot versus size of plant. If you have a smaller pot and a large plant, roots are going to be bigger. You're going to need to water more frequently. So on average, it's going to be about every 2 to 3 days, but it's really up to you to just, pay attention and water when it's needed and allow it to dry out a little bit in between applying your water.
Right, and I would add, for the seed starting, when you get your potting soil or your the growing media, as we refer to it, typically we start that out moist and sow that seed in a little moist seed, because it's the moisture that helps break down the seed coat, which allows the plant to sprout. So I'd go ahead and already have my potting soil kind of moist when I sow my seed. And then, as Holly mentioned, you just want to be aware of how big the plant is. Plants that are just newly sprouted, their roots are close to the surface. So if the surface is dry, the plant's going to be dry. But as they grow, plants are down, the very top surface may be dry, but where the roots are wet or moist, and that's perfectly fine. We don't want to get into overwatering a plant, which can be as detrimental as underwatering it. So if you can grab a little bit of the soil medium and squeeze water out, it's probably surely wet enough. And then we get to rely on rain, which I am looking out the window. It's raining right now. So that's always what we hope for as gardeners. Nature's watering.
Yes, and plants respond really well to rainwater. So if you can provide rainwater, that's ideal. Okay, so last thing we want to talk about is the applying nutrients. And I know you all did receive a little packet of fertilizer, so that's awesome. That's going to help a lot, especially for everyone growing in containers. If you're growing in the ground, you get to benefit from some of the ambient natural nutrients that may be available in the soil. But if you're growing in a container, you are responsible for providing all the nutrients that that plant is going to get. And so it's really important that you add fertilizer. And so when you're growing from seed, you want to look for the development of the true leaf on your seedling. And so this picture, you can see this is a little cilantro seed that was germinated. And you can see on the right there, that little circled leaf looks very different from the leaf that's circled on the top. And so the first leaves that come out are called like the cotyledons, and that's what's contained in the seed, and that provides like the get started nutrients for the plant. But once that true leaf forms, and it's going to be the leaf that looks like the parent plant, so it looks like a true parent plant leaf, like a mature adult plant leaf. Once you see that, then you know you need to start providing fertilizer. And so there are a lot of different options with fertilizers, but I know you all got the slow release pelletized Osmocote, I believe. So that is, if you just have one little seedling in a pot, you really don't need to put a ton on there. You can put maybe just like 4 granules on there and water those in. And then after about 3 weeks to a month, I would add some more of that slow release fertilizer. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say on that. If you are wanting to use a different type of fertilizer and you have like a liquid, when the seedlings are really, really young, please consider using a diluted version. So you could use like half strength when the seedlings are really young, because you could potentially burn them. So you just want to apply a small amount, and then as the plant develops and gets larger, it can handle a stronger application of fertilizer.
Right, and I would also be aware of the growing media that you're growing in. A lot of potting soils have a slow release fertilizer in them, and then some have micronutrients already as part of the soil mix. Others don't. So just be aware as you're choosing your media and whether or not or when you need to fertilize, what was already in there to begin with. And there are certain indications that will let you know that something needs to be fertilized more. It could be either yellow or sometimes blue in color. Look just anemic as opposed to nice and green. Those are can be indications of need for nitrogen, and or if you just have non-vigorous growth, if they just seem to be sitting there, they could probably use a dose of fertilizer. And again, it's up to you. There's holly in our kitchen garden is 100% organic, or you can use manufactured fertilizer like Peters, but whatever type of fertilizer you use is going to be beneficial to the plant.
Absolutely. One other thing I did want to add real quick that this little seedling is reminding me of is just the need to thin. So if you started with a cluster of seeds and they all germinated, like if you had 5 seeds and you dropped them kind of all in the same spot and they all germinated at the same time, you do want to thin those out. And so you can either gently, water it really well and then gently separate all those seedlings and sort of replant them with more space out in that same container or in the same area. Or you can just choose to really nurture one of those little sprouts and just eliminate all those competing seedlings. And so you just look for the strongest, most robust looking seedling, and then you can just pinch out all the rest of them. And when you're doing this, you just want to take really, really extra care not to harm the roots in any way. So when they're really young, the roots are going to be really fragile. And so you want to make sure that it's well watered. Don't let the roots dry out at any point. And it would be better to pick the seedling up by one of its leaves than to pick it up by the stem or the roots, because those are going to be more fragile. So the plant could afford to maybe lose a little bit of its leaf and still survive. But if you pinch that stem or break that root off when they're really young, then the plant might not survive. So just be really careful with the roots and the stem of the plant when they're really young and you're separating out those seedlings.
Hey, Holly, we have a question here from Ashlyn. Why do we want to add fertilizer only after the true leaf forms instead of immediately on planting? Ashlyn, that's an excellent question. It's the seed is not going to require any fertilization. It is its own encapsulated little world. So it has all the nutrients it needs to break dormancy through, you know, water and being in the soil and covered. And so it's going to break its dormancy without any help from us, other than providing the environment for which germination will be successful. And then, as again referring to the photo that's on the screen right now, those cotyledons provide the nutrients, the photosynthesis on getting the nutrients to the root. What happens with seed germination is the seed is here, and the first thing that usually pops out of the seed is a root. So it's going to be going down while a shoot is coming up, and those cotyledons provide the plant nutrient. And what if you fertilize too early, you might get some toxicity there with too much fertilizer. So we typically wait till we have our first set of true leaves, as Holly was mentioned. And by the way, those cotyledon leaf seeds will die. So as they start turning brown and folding under, don't be concerned with that. They've served their purpose, and it's kind of like the plant safety net to get it up and started. Then the true leaves start taking over and start photosynthesizing, and then developing cell division and grow. So that's why it's just a waste of resource to fertilize when you sow. And then, Holly, can you see these comments, chats? One, Karen says you can germinate some small seeds in a wet paper towel. And do you want to address that?
Sure, yeah, just the key there is to, you know, don't let your paper towel dry out. But that's a good way to, you know, I've done that with bean seeds before, just to get them, you know, maybe get them started a little bit quicker. Then you just have to transplant them into your potting mix once you start to see them, once you start to see those roots come out. I guess it just kind of depends on your situation, whether or not you want to do that. I'm all about like having as few steps as possible. So I usually just go right in the soil or the growing media. But yeah, you could definitely use wet paper towels.
Again, not letting them dry out.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, that's all we have for today. We are available for questions. If anybody, you know, has questions along the way, if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to help you. And I think we're going to do a check-in sometime in July as well, and I think we'll be there for that. So we'll be excited to hear how the plants are coming along. Do we have someone else raise their hand?
Yes, we do. All right, you are welcome to ask your question.
Hi, this is Benjamin Wang. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have a really big garden to grow my plants. I have like 200 square feet garden, but I grow a lot of plants over there. And last year, I grow birdhouse gourd and with the tomatoes on the side. And what I found is, finally, the tomatoes grow some, you know, fruit which has the gourd shape. So I'm kind of curious that whether this kind of two different species can have, you know, the mixed genes of these two plants. Is it possible to happen?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
If you did have something like that happen, you wouldn't see it until the second generation. So if you just grow two things right next to each other, there's
Yeah,
not going to
yeah.
be an opportunity for crossing. And I don't think tomatoes could cross with a squash.
So
Since that-
I actually have the pictures. I can send you the pictures and you can take a look. It's really interesting.
Sure, I'd love to see
Boy,
it.
I'd like to see that. Yeah, really, I think with gourds, which are squashes,
Yeah.
and tomatoes, I think they're two different families. And we're talking about dogs and cats breeding in that case, which is not
Okay.
but what I
Send the pictures though.
yeah, send the pictures, because what I also wonder is what variety of tomato it was, and then also when you grow two viney things together like that, you can get a lot of shading and you know, some weird environmental conditions that might cause some deformity in fruit.
Okay. Okay.
I'd love to see those pictures, though. You may be on to something.
I'll send the pictures right after this meeting.
Thanks. And I would just say, I don't know if you are supplying our email addresses, Catherine, but certainly you can. But also you can just email to utgardens@tennessee.edu, and those come to us as well. And you can find that. If you forget about it, it's on our website. So it's easy to get in touch with us via email.
Great. We also have a question in the question and answer. So Karen asked, can you see that?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. She asked, I sowed some creeping thyme seeds in a raised bed and they sprouted, and they were so tiny and never developed a second set of leaves. Eventually they were all gone. Any suggestions for a second attempt?
What was the plant again?
It was a thyme.
Creeping thyme.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Holly.
I think just try again. And again, when the plants are really, really young, they're just really fragile. And so it could be that they hit a dry spell right after they, first came out, and that took them out because their little roots were so small and their leaves were so small. It could be that a bug, like a slug or something, came along and ate them. So I guess my advice would maybe be to try again, and really, for the first few weeks, you just want to baby them, check them every day, make sure that the soil is not drying out. And then the other thing you could do is to start them in a pot and, really nurture them and keep them more protected in a little container. And then once you see that they're sturdier and they're a nicer sized plant, then put them out in the ground. Because they'll have, more challenges once they're out in the garden than when they're protected in a little container and really cared for very carefully.
Right, and that's good advice, Holly. I also see Rachel Ray, who is a friend of ours over in the garden. She comes over to the garden quite a bit. Which water technique is better? Overwater and let it drain, or just water enough? And Rachel, I just have to tell you, you have to go with the Goldilocks rule of watering. You don't want too much water, you don't want not enough water, you want just enough. And I know that sounds really kind of like, well, what's just enough? And again, as long as we're getting water down into the root zone, we're good. Right now we have a lot of newly planted plants in the garden, most flowers for the most part. So those have the little, let me find my, the little root ball that they come out of a 6-pack like you get at the Lowe's Garden Center. And we want to make sure that that root ball gets wet. So a lot of times newly planted things, you need to make sure that the root area is getting wet, and it may not matter that the area surrounding that is on the dry side. Conversely, you know, you don't want to notice that the area in your container that's not growing pot is wet, but the area right around your plant is dry. So it's more of a question, are you watering enough to get the root zone moist? And that's the key to successful watering.
Yeah, and
And
I'm gonna chime in there and say, I would go for I don't like the term over water, that sounds scary, but watering until you see a little bit drain out the bottom of the pot, I think generally is a good idea. And when I'm watering my containers in the kitchen garden, I look for bubbles to be coming up out of the soil. And if the pot has gotten pretty dry and I'm watering it and I see air bubbles coming up, then I know that there are pockets of air in that deep down in the pot. And so I continue watering until I don't see those bubbles coming up. And then I know that the pot has been fully saturated. And then I'm gonna wait a few days, you know, to a week to sort of let it dry out and let some of that, you know, let some air still be in there. So I like to water really well, water deeply, make sure that the pot is fully saturated, because especially when the plants get older, you can have spaces inside the pot that will be dry, and you can be watering it and water will be pouring out the bottom, and you think that it has been watered thoroughly, but if you stick your finger in there, you might find some dry pockets. So I like to just water really, really well and then let it chill for a few days, let it dry out some, and then water again deeply and thoroughly.
right, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. And good luck, Rachel. I wish you the best.
We have another question about potting soil. The potting soil that I'm using got wet in the bag. How dry should I let the soil get before planting my seeds?
A lot of times in those plastic bags, that potting soil will be moist because of the interior condensation. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, I would say if you can wring out water, I might let it dry just a little bit, just kind of fluff it up in your pot and let it settle down for a little while and drain. But I don't think, Holly, and you can chime in on this, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a bad thing that it's already moist when you take it out of the bag.
I think it's fine. I think if it's super, super wet, I might not add more water. You know, I might just sow my seeds and, you know, not put a ton of water on it right immediately. But I would say you're probably fine if the potting soil got wet inside the bag, to just go ahead and use it.
Right. And again, I would, you know, I see, especially as the plants get older, and you know, you're starting to get some growth on it. You know, what we teach novices that come here to water in the garden, our students and all, is, you know, you can wash off the leaves with the water and kind of clean them up, that type of thing, but we're not watering the leaves, we're watering the roots. So a lot of times, especially if you're growing in the ground, you know, you want to put your hose spigot, and you want to have a diffuser on it of some kind, so it's not spraying out full force. You're not putting out a fire. But you know, you want to get under there and water where the plant stem meets the soil surface. So I see on a lot of commercials people watering the tops of their plants, and it's like, that's not getting to where the plant is thirsty. So it's like, if you're thirsty, you're going to pour water in your mouth. You're not going to put your hand in water and think you're going to, you know, quench your thirst. So watering at the right place is equally important. All right.
All right.
Any other questions for us? Hey, and I would just remind you again of the resource that you have here on campus. The gardens are open 365 days a year during daylight hours. There's no gate. There's no admission charge. There's parking, which right now, and I'm saying this with hesitation, right now, parking over here by the UT Gardens is open and free because nobody's using the parking lot. So come on over, bring your family, bring your kids, and check it out because we're here.
Okay. There are no other questions. I want to thank you both very much for sharing your knowledge with us and making yourselves available. And we'll do a check-in next month to see how everyone's plants are doing. And thank you.
All right.
Oh,
Thank you.
our pleasure.
Happy gardening, everyone.
Good luck with your seeds.
What we say here at UT Gardens is grow big orange. So
Grow
there you
big
go.
orange.
Yes.
That works. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.